Hi, and welcome to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. I will be your host. My name is Attorney Andrew Couture, and with me, as always, is my lovely co-host, Mary Lotze. And today we have a very special guest, Caroline Colarusso. Ms. Colarusso is in an interesting legal battle right now, and she is currently fighting for our rights in regards to an honest and fair election. So first of all, Caroline, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thank you for having me. It's really great to be here and talk about these things. I just came off my second term as a Stoneham Select Woman. I served there for the last 6 years. It was early April. I decided not to run for a third term. And I'm also the Republican State Committee woman for this chunk of Middlesex County, Stoneham, Reading, Wakefield, Malden, Melrose, and Winchester. And just in general, someone that just really cares about our state, the future of our state, and the direction that we're heading in.
So so you're currently in a legal battle in regards to mail-in voting. It seems to be a bit of a hot potato topic, a hot topic throughout the United States, and certainly in Massachusetts, where no one really wanted to touch it. And the decision is just to claim that, well, the voters love the mail-in voting. I don't think the voters love the mail-in voting. I think the Democrat politicians like the mail-in voting because they get to cheat and steal and lie and do whatnot. But there's no data to prove this. So enlighten us a little bit here, Caroline. What exactly is going on here with the mail-in voting?
That's a great question. And my eyebrows were raised when the day after the election, the Secretary of State was on a media tour and he was promoting mail-in voting as a permanent option for Massachusetts. And, I was an operations manager for almost 30 years. And so when there's a process, especially a new process, right, it requires some evaluation and honest evaluation with some quantifiable numbers and not, someone's opinion. So when the Secretary of State's out there the day after the election saying how he wants to make it permanent because it was such a big success, I believe he should be substantiating that. And it was basically his opinion. Now, there were a lot of nonprofit groups, far left groups in Massachusetts that have been instrumental in driving policy. Okay, but the Secretary of State is the top election official of our state. He should not be out there with any left-leaning or right-leaning group for that matter. He's there in a fair and just position as our top election official, authentically evaluating the process, articulating that evaluation so that people can have confidence about it. But that's not what happened. When I saw him on a media tour, I just said, something's wrong with this. This is being rushed down our throats without any sincere evaluation of the process. And at that point, myself and others just really started to ask some questions around the process. Querying resulted in, on December 9th, the Joint Committee on Election Laws in Massachusetts submitted 8 or 9 substantive basic questions surrounding the process of mail-in voting. These weren't high-tech questions. They were basic questions. That letter was sent to the Secretary of State on December 9th. Over 3 months from the date of that letter, after plea to please answer the questions, basic questions like how many ballots are returned, was there a chain of custody, were signatures matched? These are basic questions, right? The Secretary of State finally came clean and said, these questions are impossible to answer. Now, when I heard that response, I really became concerned because if you know anything, I'm a retired postmaster, about the mail, when you mail out close to 4 million ballots and you have X amount that are returned, they come in postal trays and each foot is equivalent to a piece count. So essentially it's a mathematical computation, just count the trays and you'd know how many ballots, applications were returned. That number would give us a clear indication on how healthy our voter rolls are, right? But we don't have that number because they won't tell us what that number is. Answer us by saying it's impossible to tell us how many ballots are returned. That's a mathematical computation. That's an easy finding to arrive at if you just go count them. Now, to me, I feel like there's a reason why they're not telling us that. I feel like there must be a large amount of these return ballot applications that came back that will not support giving the voters confidence about this process.
So, I mean, you mentioned something about how your eyebrows were raised. My eyebrows were raised the evening of the vote, because being a local politician myself and interested in the process, I was with somebody running, and it was my job to try to get numbers for them. And I was down at City Hall, and they posted the numbers on the window. And as I was collecting the numbers, I had somebody who I did not know, but I had a good inkling that they were not of the Republican mindset, based on their dress and their mannerisms and whatnot. I could kind of tell. But I heard a gasp. Oh, this is exactly what we needed. This mail-in voting has got to stay. This is exactly what we needed. Yeah, that's when I was like, yeah, there's a lot of fraud in this, considering there was no regulation of turning in ballots, because you just had these drop boxes that anybody could, drop a ballot into. No, foresight, no managing of where these ballots are coming from, and it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. But going on that, we find that the court systems on all levels, let's face it. I mean, even SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, will not touch this. And they don't even want to question the concerns of the voting processes and the irregularities of the 2020 election. So what's the reality of mail-in voting in mass? I mean, do you think that this is going to be a permanent thing?
So as an attorney, right, you probably look at things the way I look at things. Is this lawful? I think at the heart of this question, people have to put aside their personal feelings and say, is this lawful? Now, Massachusetts has the oldest constitution in the country. And our Constitution deals with the way we vote, okay? So our Constitution says if you want to change voting, if you want to change it, you have to go through a constitutional amendment process, as you people know, because you're heavily involved. It's back-to-back legislative sessions and a vote of the people. That takes time. Under COVID, the constitutional process essentially was usurped.
Yeah.
And under COVID, it was like, we have to do something because we need people to vote. Well, there's already a provision in Massachusetts law constitutionally that allows for absentee ballot voting. What they did was they did universal, no excuse mail-in voting, which instead of being initiated by the voter, it's initiated by the state. That's the first issue I have. The second issue, and Andrew, I think as an attorney, this will speak to you loudly, and Mary, also to you too as an activist, right? Elections are meant to be held where, folks? In the public eye, not a back office somewhere, in the public eye, so that you can walk in, you can be a poll watcher, you can observe, you can ask questions. There's people there, okay? It adds credibility to the process. But when you have an election conducted in a back office where bureaucrats are essentially opening ballots, and you don't have the same level of public confidence, nor do you have the same level of integrity, nor do you have the process functioning. Think about how basic this is. The way it was designed to function in the eye of the public under public scrutiny.
Caroline, I have a couple. I'm sorry, Andrew.
No, go ahead, Mary. I've been, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. Could you just very quickly explain the difference between an absentee ballot? You kind of alluded to it, it's requested by the voter, versus what we had with this no excuse ballot. And then I'd like to get to another question right after that.
So to preface my remarks with respect to your question, I want you to think about Boston for a minute in Massachusetts, okay? I want you to think about the melting pot that we are and the transient place that we are. We're probably one of the most transient cities and states in the country, right? College students, you know, we have great medical, so people come and go. So when you take our voter rolls and you mail out close to 4 million ballots, because that's what universal, no excuse mail-in voting is. You take every one of the voter rolls and you mail out those ballots, okay? That's stark to understand. Whereas you have a process in place that's voter generated that says, I'm either going to I have a religious holiday, I'm going to be incapacitated, or I'm going to be out of town. So those reasons allow for a voter to initiate a process which has much more authenticity to it. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a retired postmaster. I know what happens in Boston with mail because I worked in Boston and in Massachusetts and in many of the suburbs. People move, okay? They're not where they were a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago. So you have all these ballots going out to whoever you have on those voter rolls without any assurance that those voter rolls are up to date, which leads back to the question, how many ballot applications were returned? That is going to give us a good indication of how clean our voter rolls are. Because if you mail out 4 million and you get 1 million back or 500,000 back, that's a pretty large, 500,000 is 12%, right? That's a pretty large number. And we, the voters, want confidence in the process. We want to know that our voter rolls are being maintained. These are things that are important to people because I think regardless of which side of the political fence you sit on, you want a fair process and you want one person, one vote. And that's what we fear with mail-in voting was in jeopardy, that the processes weren't there that normally are there. Signatures are normally checked with absentee ballots. Mary, that's critical. You have to, that's what the law, it's lawful to do that. If you're going to accept all these mail-in ballots and not check signatures, you're leaving out an important part of the legal process.
Well,
And
I know in Fitchburg, because I do work our election polls and I work the early election as well as the election day. And many people were concerned, they were confused. They were getting ballots in the mail that they came to us on election day or early voting, and they said, I didn't request that. They'd bring them in and they would give them to us blank, you know, fortunately. But the question rises is what happened to the ballots of the people who didn't bring them in or didn't say, I destroyed it, I didn't request it, I destroyed it. So let's get on to the actual legal issue, because I think, Andrew, this is something that you will really understand because you were almost put in a legal catch-22 or a legal conundrum. When you first brought this up at a time before the elections when things could have been stopped, you were told what? You didn't have legal standing. Couldn't you kind of explain that and then bring it to the more recent court case in Worcester? And you were told, why didn't you bring it up before?
Was that was a question for me and not Caroline?
No, that was for Caroline. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
so that, yeah, I misunderstood too, but you're driving in the right lane now, okay? Because when we collected our signatures to get on the ballot, to be candidates, our understanding was we were going to have an election on November 3rd. There was going to be early voting, which is another constitutional issue, but we understood that. We had no idea there was going to be universal mail-in voting, okay? So we said, hey, wait a minute. It seems like you're kind of changing the rules, right, in the middle of the game. And we were told, well, you really can't file a complaint because you haven't been harmed. So you may win the election, so you need to just sit tight. So here we are objecting to the process, the way this was done, and that there wasn't a constitutional amendment. And by the way, let me insert this important aspect to this conversation. Back in 2019, the legislature tried to promote permanent mail-in voting by filing a bill. The difference is they understood it required a constitutional amendment, and they began the constitutional amendment process. And you know what I'm going to surmise, they said, wow, this is a process that is cumbersome. A constitutional amendment comes, we better just hold it, okay? And so they're aware of the process. But with COVID, everyone said, you know what? We have to do something. Let's do this. At least in Massachusetts, they did. And I want to tell you, Republicans and Democrats, not one person, not one state rep, not one state senator stood up and said, you have a constitutional issue here. I understand COVID's going on, but you cannot do this. Not one person, and Mary and Andrew, no one besides us, no one is fighting this in court. I don't know what people are missing on this, especially the Republican Party state leadership, and why they wouldn't see this as a threat to our election system, right? Our election process here in the Commonwealth. No one is saying anything about it. It's almost as if, hey, they're glossing over it, you know, and moving on. And the way I feel is that voting is so sacred, right? We all have the right to vote because people before us fought for this right to vote. And so we have to safeguard this process and make sure that it's fair and equitable for everybody, and that each person's vote has the same weight. One person, one vote. And there are so many questions arising from mail-in voting where people just don't have that confidence. I mean, if you look at some of the numbers right now in Massachusetts and nationwide, people overwhelmingly, both parties favor voter ID. Why? Because it adds authenticity to the process. I stood down the polls. I saw people hand people their IDs and say, hey, I want to do this, because it gives them an extra layer of assurance. They feel like I'm supposed to be doing this. Yet in we're one of only 16 states in the country that has no form of voter ID. So while the general public is moving towards more of a, we want more accountability, we want more safeguards in the process, Massachusetts, namely the Secretary of State, is saying, no, let's go to permanent mail-in voting as the way Massachusetts votes in the future. And I think that's inherently wrong.
Caroline, a couple of weeks ago, you brought this to court, you in Worcester, and what were you met with there?
So it was interesting, right? I felt as if the Maura Healey's attorney, he was arrogant. I felt that he was totally disrespecting us. And you know, guys, one of the reasons I agreed to do your show is because I think that you people are respectful of other people and their opinions and their points of view, politically diverse points of view, civil discourse, right? So we may not agree on everything, but I still respect people's points of views. I felt like that Maura Healey's attorney was arrogant with us.
Who was
And
it,
I
Carol?
felt like, I can't exactly pronounce his name. I'll try to grab it by the end of the call, but he was like almost, you know, speaking to us in a condescending manner. And all we're doing is,
I've dealt with the Attorney General's office on many, many, many occasions, and that's just it. They are the supreme rulers. You do what they say, and do not have any question. It's coming directly from Maura Healey. Yeah, Carolyn, I know exactly what you're talking about.
They don't understand they work for us. We do
No,
not.
they don't work. They don't work for us. They don't work for us. They work for the politicians.
Ironically, the judge, she intercepted one of his points, and she said, "This is a well-written argument. I've read it. It's clear. It's, you know, I forget what other adjectives she used, but she gave credence to our argument, which kind of made us feel good. Our argument is one-lane argument. It's not about machines. It's not about, we feel this was unconstitutional. If you want to change the way we vote, follow the amendment process, get the constitutional amendment, back-to-back legislative sessions, a vote of the people. We don't have a leg to stand on. But the way it was done It usurped that constitutional process. And so we felt slighted. And as you say, we can't. So one of the issues in our case was, what do you want for a remedy? So our attorney graciously and in a very sensitive way spoke to the judge, and he said, look it, our clients, you something to reference, you're asking for a revote. And he said, our clients were told they weren't aggrieved because they weren't harmed. They had no legal standing. Andrew, you'll get this. So they had no alternative in the election process. The election occurs and, they have to have legal standing. They now have it. They were now harmed. So we're throwing it out there, Your Honor. If you come up with a better, amenable solution, by all means present it. He said, we're not here to say it's our ball, we want to take it and have it our way. We're here appealing to the court, asking you, Your Honor, to come up with something that's amenable that will help my clients feel, less aggrieved, because they all feel aggrieved. And you know what, to her credit, the judge, she received that statement from our attorney, and it kind of made us feel good. Everyone wants to feel validated, right? We just want to feel like, hey, what we're saying matters to you. Please validate it. Don't speak to us in a condescending manner, because we don't speak to you that way.
Have you heard
going off of what you said, Caroline, I mean, you didn't have standing going all the way up to the election. Then the election, you did have standing, but it was too late. So,
exactly.
And that's where the Supreme Court was slippery. And they were like, oh, you don't have standing, you don't have standing. Oh, you got standing now, but it's too late now.
Well, Andrew and Mary, let's talk about one more important point about the way this was done. And I think I know Dean Trant's in your district, right? So check this out. So challengers, because of the calendar, the voting calendar, our primaries are in September. Ballot applications were mailed out in October, early October. We lost a whole month of campaigning. That heavily favors incumbents, and it diminishes the opportunities to reach voters for challengers like me. So our attorney made the case that, hey, when you implemented this, you took off a month of their campaigning. Anything can happen. For instance, if you and I voted absentee because we were out of town and there was a major scandal for whatever office, presidential or whatever, and we had already voted, we had voted absentee, that's our vote, right? That's your vote. So if things happen during the course of a campaign, voters lose the ability to change their vote. I mean, my understanding is people were able to go in and say, hey, I already voted by mail, but I want to change. But how many people are really going to make that concerted effort? They're going to be like, I voted. If I knew this, maybe I wouldn't have voted for her or him, but I'm going to leave it, now. So it really diminished the opportunities for challengers too, we felt.
So where do you stand right now? We've only got a couple of minutes left. Where do you stand? Where does your case stand right now?
Our case right now, we're waiting for the judge's decision. We thought we may have had it back by now. I thought we may be able to discuss it, but we don't. So we're still waiting to hear what the judge says and how she rules. We're hoping that she'll at least rule favorably on the constitutional portion. And even if she doesn't, we really don't expect a revote. And I think that's fair to say. We communicated that, but we do want to be understood. We do want to be heard, and we do want our Constitution followed. We all should want that, because if they can do this with voting, they can do it with anything else they want. And people need to understand what's at risk here. We have a Constitution in this country. We have a Constitution in this state. Okay, we're unique. We're unique that we have this. We need to follow it. The rule of law is paramount. It's the rule of law. It doesn't, discriminate. And so we want that followed. And that's really our beef, Mary and Andrew, with the whole case. Follow the law, and we'll go on and live our lives,
And when you speak of arrogance, we've now, since that December 9th letter to Secretary of State Galvin, it's been, what, 5 months, over 5 months? And have you heard anything back on, other than just, we can't get the information, it's impossible? Have you heard anything back?
The only response we have is those questions are impossible to answer, which quite frankly is an insult. Okay. it's an insult because I worked in the mail industry. There is a way to tell us how many ballots applications were returned. It's a counting process, mathematical computation. And why not tell the voters? Why not tell the people? We mailed out 500,000, 750,000, 500,000, 50,000 came back. Why not tell us? Because it's revealing. It is revealing. I had people call me from all over the state saying, in my apartment complex, there's ballot applications. You know, these people have lived here in years. I mean, I had people call me. So
Yes.
we know it's a flawed
We
process.
had many reports of that throughout the state, yes.
You know, but Mary, what do adults in the room do? They acknowledge that it's a flawed process and they fix it. They don't deny it and they don't not answer public records requests. Okay, that behavior is telling. And that's why I am deeply disappointed in the Secretary of State. And I hope you share this because he needs to know that it's as the top election official, he needs to respond from anyone's questions at all, let alone the Joint Committee on Election Laws. Those questions are warrant an answer, a truthful, substantive answers to those questions, and we're not getting them. And that's problematic.
Caroline, I got a quick question. You said that you're waiting on the decision from the judge. So you filed the complaint. Did the Commonwealth file a motion to dismiss?
They did. And we had
And
a
that's what you're
hearing.
waiting on?
Yes, we had a hearing on April 8th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I figured, but I wanted to make sure that was clear. As for, you know, letting the Secretary of State know, I can guarantee you that I will personally put it on their Facebook page and link them to this interview, so that they know. I think that's a very important. And Carolyn, I love what you're doing. I just have one complaint. You didn't go with me as your attorney.
You know, Andrew, I want to say, first of all, I admire your work. I admire your enthusiasm and your passion. We had a hard time finding an attorney. And the reason we had a hard time is because, let's be honest, people are afraid. They're afraid. You have more political courage than most, and so does Mary. People are getting fired from their job. People can't post on social. Let's face it, this is people's livelihoods. I am of the opposite school. Here's what I say. I have a voice. I have a First Amendment. I'm respectful. I'm going to say my piece. I'll lose my job, but I'm going to say my piece. And I think more Americans, more Bostonians, more people in the Commonwealth have to start doing that because we're losing our freedom. Dershowitz has been all over the television speaking on this issue. He said our First Amendment rights are fundamentally at risk right now in America. So please, if you're watching this, don't be afraid. Always be respectful, always be factual, but speak out because God gave us a voice so that we can use it.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. I mean, thank you for your courage. Thank you for speaking out and joining us, Andrew and I, for the interview tonight. And for our viewers, please share this information with your friends. Not everybody loves mail-in voting. We're the Fitchburg Republican City Committee, and we stand strong for all of your constitutional rights. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.